I grew up in New York. We usually went to one baseball game a year because it was such a hassle to get to the game. Usually took public transit. It was an hour and a half to get there, an hour and a half getting home. Here you can just, walk right up to the stadium, at least from our place, or even if you're driving in. St. Louis is just so easy to navigate, and it still is. I mean, we just have to overcome some of our issues.
When you moved downtown in 2005, Wash Ave was probably, or like you mentioned, really at its peak or close to it. The decline must have been slow, and I'm sure at first it wasn't obvious. But what were some of the signs, or when did you first think we're in trouble and we need to do something?
I was concerned about downtown even when we first moved down there. Things looked good. There were Loft tours. There were thousands of people showing up.
Wow.
A lot of people speculating on properties. Developers were anxious to get in. They were overpaying on some of these big warehouse buildings, where it's hard. You would understand this. It's hard to, get your investment back when trying to maximize the number of units going into these buildings with these big floor plates to, get adequate windows. And so that, there are a lot of, as we toured other lofts, we were seeing that some of these were going to be problems when it came to resales. And speculators were buying a lot of them. And then the recession hit in 2008. That's when things really took a tumble downtown. And to this day, we haven't recovered from that recession. And I think that was sort of the precipitating event that really highlighted the potential issues downtown. And of course, the pandemic was really an awful experience downtown because desperate landlords were renting to people they shouldn't have. There was the cops essentially withdrew from downtown. Traffic lawlessness was rampant. It still is to some degree. And so it's a recession and then amplified by the pandemic. And to a large degree, we haven't recovered.
And do you stay downtown, aside from the walkability, because you feel like you have a sense of responsibility to aid in the turnaround?
Yeah. It's a discussion we have, my wife and I have almost every day about how long we're going to stick it out. She'd like to move to Clayton. We're not young anymore. We're in our 70s. So the question is whether, we'll live long enough to see that turnaround. But, I think to some degree we're energized by the efforts to try to fix things. Nobody likes people that just complain and don't contribute to solving problems. And I'd like to think we're doing that. At some point, we hope that we can get a supportive administration and others that will join with us. Because as I said earlier, I don't think it's that hard to turn this downtown around.
What role do you think Great Rivers Greenway plays in the turnaround of downtown in terms of, I know there's plans for additional connectivity, bike paths, walking paths, things like that. Do you think that is a piece that can help tie together some of these islands that we're talking about?
Yeah, to some degree. I think it's a minor piece. I think they do great work, and I love what they've done. I wouldn't want to demean any of that. I just don't think you got to deal with fundamentals. You're in the development business. You understand what it's like to deal with the details and the fundamentals, the things that make a place attractive to live. I think those are the things that are important. Obviously, public safety is very high on the list, but just so many other public services that are important. And then, you add the kind of amenities like Great Rivers Greenway provides, and our sports teams provide, and the shows at Stiefel or the Dome. All of those things ultimately will attract people if you've got the underlying conditions. You can't have people afraid to come downtown. If people are afraid to come downtown, none of the other stuff matters. And that's kind of what we're dealing with.
Coming from New York, I'm sure you're very familiar with what a true walkable urban core should look like or can look like. Was there ever a time since you've been in St. Louis, I think you said since 1978, where you felt like St. Louis was on that path to having that real urban core?
Oh, absolutely. That's why we moved downtown in 2005. I mean, we're city people. I grew up in New York, lived for a while in Manhattan, got rid of our car. So we understood, we used transit every day, public transit. We walked every place. We walked miles. So yeah, we understood that. And St. Louis is the closest, downtown St. Louis was the closest we could come to sort of recapturing that idea for ourselves, and we were on that path. Clearly on that path in 2005 when we moved downtown. But it's just sort of dissipated at this point. Still walkable. I mean, we got a dry cleaners across the street. We got a movie theater downtown. If we decide we want to go to a Cardinals game and the weather's nice, we just go online and buy tickets and walk over. We still have all of that, but, it's just, you don't have the excitement. You don't have this level of street activity. Walking around Manhattan, the sidewalks are just jammed with people. It's clearly pedestrians take precedence over the automobile. That is not the case in downtown or any place in St. Louis, for that matter.
It's funny you mentioned that coming from a larger metro area, the Greater Toronto area, over there, it's not expected that you go downtown and you can park in front of the building you're going to. But I feel like that's kind of the culture here. And I'm not knocking it. I can understand why that's the sentiment. But I feel like the expectation here is you should be able to go downtown and park right in front of the building you're going to.
Yeah, it's funny you should mention that. We were talking this morning about, there was a big Metallica concert downtown Friday and then again Sunday. And people were caught in these huge traffic jams. It's as if they were trying to drive, that the Dome was a suburban stadium surrounded by parking lots. And they could have parked a few blocks away and walked to the stadium in 5 minutes. But they just kept trying to force their way down right next to the stadium. And but what you say is absolutely true. If people can't park next to where they work or where they live, they're very unhappy.
I see MetroLink getting used on Cardinals game days to what its, I think, potential can be. You have 50,000 people visiting downtown whenever there's a game. Do you think that we'll ever see that type of activity on a regular basis in downtown in the next, let's call it a decade? I'm sure if we were to think 20, 30 years down the road, anything can happen. But do you think it's possible for that type of activity? Or the Metallica concert, for example, that's another good one as well.
Yeah, I'd like to think it's possible. I think we certainly have that potential. I think the problem right now is whether it's the Metallica concert or a baseball game or a soccer game, folks drive in from the suburbs and immediately flee after the event. And part of it is, we don't have enough restaurants anymore. So many of them went out of business during the pandemic. People get frustrated with it. They can't hang around downtown and eat in a restaurant, and we just can't handle the crowds like we used to. So yeah, I think there's a lot of pieces that have to fall into place before we are able to reach that kind of urban environment that we're all seeking.
What's your favorite thing about St. Louis? I'm hoping to have a little positivity in here too. There's a lot to be negative about, without a doubt, but there are some things that St. Louis has going for it. So what's your favorite thing about the city and the region?
Just sort of the ease of getting around and being able, I grew up in New York City. We usually went to one baseball game a year because it was such a hassle to get to the game. Usually took public transit. It was an hour and a half to get there, an hour and a half getting home. Here you can just, walk right up to the stadium, at least from our place, or even if you're driving in. Our daughter lives in the Boston area, and it very prosperous area that's growing like crazy. I mean, you can't get around. I mean, they have an extensive public transit system that's not well maintained. But, we had to pick our grandson up at school, which was about 6 miles away. It took 45 minutes to get there. St. Louis is just so easy to navigate. It's too easy, really, in certain respects. It's an easy place to live. We did when we moved here in 1978. We didn't intend to stay here in St. Louis, but it was just an easy place to live, and it still is. I mean, we just have to overcome some of our issues.
I agree. The ease of transportation or getting around is a huge plus here. Like, the way I think about it is, when you're in a bigger city, you may have all the world-class amenities that you want around you, but you can't truly use them because you're stuck in traffic, you're stuck in lines, and then your cost of living is so high you may not be able to afford a lot of those amenities. Whereas here in St. Louis, we have all the amenities one can want, and you can use them because we have the low cost of living, the ease of getting around, and then for the most part, you're not stuck in lines, I guess, unless you're trying to park in front of the Dome to go to a Metallica concert.
Yeah, I mean, growing up in New York, we probably went to the Bronx Zoo, which is the big zoo in New York, maybe once every 5 years. Here, zoo is free. We go, if it's a nice day, we just drive over and go to the zoo. I mean, we can go 15 times a year. We go to the Botanical Garden, world-class facility. The Muni, again, a world-class venue. All of that is accessible to us. So that, it's really a great thing. And the cost of living, of course, is relatively low here. Again, all these advantages. And so what's wrong? Why can't we grow as a region having all of these wonderful advantages? I think that's the question that ought to be in front of people.